I wanted to talk a little bit about the research that you did a couple of years ago. You produced a terrific paper and did a survey, produced a lot of statistical information on contact experiences. First off, when you did your studies, and you mentioned it a few moments ago, was there a certain number of suspect testimonies that you expected to get from people? And if you did expect it and did get them, how would you siphon off the suspect testimonies as opposed to the genuine ones?
Let me explain how we set up the experiencer questionnaire and phase 2 of that, which is the American Personality Inventory. There were a team of 4 of us who developed the questions for the questionnaire. I have a background in social research. From when I was in college, I worked on a social research project. We had Dr. Michael Austin Melton, who also had experience in this, and Craig Lang, who had a master's degree in computer science, and Denise Stoner. So we came up with questions, and we had trick questions. We had 118 questions. We wanted to have 500 participants. And in our trick questions, we were going to be able to determine anyone who was simply coming in to hoax and to skew our results. So actually, we received close to 600 completed questionnaires. Well, not all of them were complete. We eliminated the ones that were incomplete, and we eliminated the ones who were obvious hoaxers. Then Dr. Don C. Donderi, who spent his entire professional career at McGill University as in the psychology department as a social researcher, administered the American Personality Inventory. The American Personality Inventory was developed to determine what self-identified experiencers were actual abductees. And as opposed to wannabes, people who knew a lot about the topic, but who were just faking it. And then those in the general population, which was a third group, who knew very little about it, and maybe they were just trying to hoax us. So what he found is that there were many people who were clustered right around what they called the UFO abduction group. But there were many that were scattered very widely in that. We did not have people who were members of the general population hoaxing because we'd already removed them. We didn't have wannabes either in that group, although we had a couple who were very close to that. So we were able to identify the abductees as opposed to the survey takers, all 518. And then we compared their results. And what we discovered is those who were in the abductee group had certain characteristics at a much greater percentage than those experiencers overall.
Okay, so distinguishing between an abductee and a contactee, did you have to run 2 separate surveys? Is there a difference between the 2?
We only identified the abductees from the 118 questions survey. And we ended up with 516 surveys that we could use. The difference is that among all the survey takers, there was this group who had UFO Abduction Syndrome, which we called the abductees. And so the experiencers were different than the abductees. The abductees had the knowledge and the emotional impact of having been taken to craft against their will. Among the overall group of experiencers, we had people who were contactees, who had attempted to initiate in this experience, people who were channeling, people who were meditating, people who were having highly positive experiences.
Okay. What about the non-human intelligences from either involved with the abductees or the contactees? Did you survey what race these aliens were? Did people come up with a specific race, or was there a whole multitude of them?
Well, we came up with 17 different races and a few that beyond that. But the most frequently reported were what we think of as grays. There are several different, you might say, nationalities or species of grays. So there's a wide range in the gray group. You could probably divide that into another 20 groups. But 4.5 to 5.5 feet tall were the most prevalent group. And then the smaller grays, who were 3.5 to 4.5 feet tall and were in a different type of role than the taller grays. The taller grays were the scientists, the educators, the escorts. The smaller grays were in a subsidiary role as the guards and as the assistants. The next group were those who had a human appearance, but were non-human.
Right.
And the third group was most frequently seen were those mantis-type insectoids who often worked with grays. And then the next group was a reptilian type. And the reptilian type often worked with a type of human type. So those were the most prevalent groups. And then, of course, hybrids who were seen in an alien environment as well. After that, there were tall whites that were seen mostly among those who had positive contact experiences, not so much among the abductee group. And, you know, you go down the list: blues, various types of blues, Sasquatch types, just a variety of different entities of all different sizes. So it's all laid out in that report that I wrote for the Mutual UFO Network. And Dr. Donderi, he's named in that, and he wrote his own report as well.
It's the grays that I think are the real confusing race out there, because I've done several reports on greys, and the reports where I mention the greys as being a benevolent race seem to go down really well. But a couple of times that I've produced reports where the greys have been malevolent, I've copped a lot of grief over. So maybe we need to put more research into who the greys really are and
well,
isolate all the...
We did put research into that, and what we discovered is that the grays generally are very businesslike. There was about 10% of the individuals who took part in our survey who said that they had evil, negative, you know, that kind of contact. And it wasn't necessarily with the grays. And there was a very small percentage who said that they had positive contact with the grays as well. But it is not that prevalent. It's only about 10 to 15% of people who say that they're having highly positive contact with a group of grays. So I think it depends upon the type of gray and who those grays are working with. And also, I believe that there is a type of interdimensional gray that is not extraterrestrial in origin. There are interdimensional negative entities that can come into the human environment where there is a human being who is either negative, who is an alcoholic, who is an abuser of opioids, who is in a great deal of pain and is taking maybe opioids in order to treat that pain. So there are people who are lower vibrating humans, and they can have attachments by lower vibrating entities who can come into the human consciousness and can materialize as a result of that human consciousness and attach and come back. When you hear of people who are being bothered night after night after night, it tends to be those individuals who are vibrating at a lower rate than the average human.
Mm.
And you know, the human negative collective consciousness helps with that as well, from all that I've been able to learn about this. So you know, it's very important to keep a positive attitude. If people do have these attachments, they can be removed by a shaman, by some ministers, by people like Dr. Barton. So, you know, we have a way of removing those. The good thing about it is that they can be removed. You know, a lot of people who come into the program with these non-human entities who are of extraterrestrial origin do not have as easier time ending their contact, because they'll be told that they made a contractual agreement before they came into this lifetime, and they can try to end the contract and stop this from happening. If these are benevolent entities, they might do that, or the people might receive a reprieve. I have written in my book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted, about a dozen suggestions on how to end contact if you do want to end this.
Okay, and that makes a lot of sense. Kevin Briggs explained that to me the other day about your vibrational frequency and how important it is to keep it above a certain level, because you'll start to attract things that you really don't want in your life. Do people, yeah, have you heard, I mean, because it kind of takes us into another realm when we talk about these entities, the bad entities. I mean, people from our religious community will say, well, you're talking about demons.
Yes, and you know, some of this is the negative entities are what people might be referring to as demons, because just like demons, they attach to the host, they feed off the negative emotions, they grow more powerful by feeding off these negative emotions, and the longer this goes on, the more powerful they grow. And so you could refer to them as demons. That's more of a religious, I think, term for them. So if you're a religious person, then yes, and I'm a religious person. Sometimes I make the mistake of calling them demons, and people correct me and say you shouldn't put your religious point of view on this. So yes, they're essentially the same thing.
The research you did, Kathleen, did people indicate the level of empathy they received, especially on the abductee side from the aliens?
Yes, humans undergo changes as a result of this contact. And some of those changes are very, very similar to the changes that near-death experiencers go through. They become more empathetic, more psychic, more intuitive, more empathic, which is different from being empathetic. Empathic means that you have a psychic sense where you can feel the sensations from another person as if they were your own. So if another person is hurting, for example, you can feel their pain. If another person has some kind of disease, you can feel that. You can feel other people's emotions. Experiencers of abduction uh, at a much higher rate than just experiencers in general also see our world as a different place than they had before they had these experiences of what we might refer to as
Yeah.
abductions,
Yeah.
where they become aware that there's something of part of something much greater. And they tend to develop uh, that concern about our environment, that concern about nuclear weapons. They've been on craft, they've been shown screens, they've been educated scientifically about the danger that these human behaviors pose to our existence on this planet.
Okay. All right. Two or three more questions, Kathleen. One involves a hybrid program. I interviewed a lady last Thursday who's been a lifelong experiencer and part of an alien hybrid program. Was there any indication that this is prevalent, or is it something that's isolated?
The alien hybridization program appears to be prevalent among the Greys, particularly, and some people have mentioned reptilian hybrids, but that's more on the positive reptilian side. There are many types of reptilians as well as
Mm-hmm.
Greys. So, but our long-term knowledge of this comes from people like Dr. David Jacobs, like Bud Hopkins, like Barbara Lamb. And so the point of view about this varies by researcher, whereas Barbara Lamb thinks that it's something very nice. Jacobs and Hopkins looked at this as being something that was not good. But this hybridization program, in my judgment, based upon my many, many years of research and investigation, is that they are attempting to upgrade the human genome to correct some of the more destructive behaviors
Right.
and emotions that humans have. At the same time, they, especially the Greys, are benefiting from this because they have lost the ability to reproduce in the normal way. They have lost a lot of these emotions that they once had. And so they are producing their own hybrids as well. So it benefits them, and we believe that it benefits us as well.
An interesting aspect of this too, Kathleen, told to me was that once the child is born, that they like to maintain a parental connection between the mother and the hybrid child. So occasionally they'll bring the two together. Was there anything in the research indicating that was also the case?
It is the case where they are brought together. Now, with my background in psychology and sociology, I'm aware that during World War I and World War II, when orphaned babies were separated because the parents had been killed, and raised in orphanages where there were many, many babies that did not receive enough contact with humans, they suffered greatly. They never really learned how to be humans.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been part of the problem that I've had with the hybridization program. Is this even real? Because can those hybrids receive enough human warmth? Can they actually learn to become human with limited contact? What I've discovered is that there are many of these hybrids who are actually born to human families. And they possess these special characteristics that people like Mary Rodwell refer to as the new human. And it does appear to be true that these children are being born to the human experiencer family, abductee family. And so they grow up with what I think of as very positive traits.
What about the men in black? It's a popular subject among the UFO community. Did people indicate that they were harassed by creatures or beings that we term as men in black?
Well, it seems that the men in black phenomenon is fairly small. We didn't find a lot of people who were having contact or being threatened among the overall experiencer population. So I think that maybe the people who go public might be threatened. Those who come into the public eye receive publicity. And another thing was black helicopters. There was a higher percentage, I think it was about 20 to 30%, who stated that they did see black unmarked helicopters hovering over their homes or near their homes in conjunction with an abduction experience.
Hmm. One of the scariest Men in Black stories I heard was actually from Denise Stoner herself, and she talked about an experience she had with her mother at a shopping centre, and it was absolutely intriguing. She told it she told it to us back in February during the summit back then. I did a story a little while ago about a Brazilian man who had sexual relations with an alien, and I thought that this just must be an isolated case. Was that part of the research study you did?
We didn't ask if people had had sexual relations with aliens. No, I know that it does occur. Some people have reported it. It is in a relatively small number of reports that we receive. And I can't say that that is the true number, because some people just feel uncomfortable speaking about that sort of thing.
Okay. What about people given information by the NHI's, information such as relating to Earth itself, or information relating to what's going to happen in the future? Do people receive those sort of downloads?
They absolutely do, and it's more prevalent among the abductee group, where as when they're taken to craft, they receive an education teaching them about the environment and about nuclear weapons. And those whose frequency is raised over time can receive telepathic downloads as well. So yes, absolutely. And that is something that we looked for in open-ended questions, and we received many responses from individuals who have been educated in this way.
We talk about the trauma involved in being abducted. L. Gray Anderson had a case that he'd been following for quite some time, where the person was obviously being traumatized at various stages, but when asked whether he didn't want his alien to show up, he said no. He says I want it to show up. So despite that, this appears to be people that that if you want to take, if you had the option of taking it away from them, they'd rather you did not.
That is true. We discovered that 71% of the individuals who participated in our survey stated that given the opportunity to have it end, they would not want their experiences to end. And I wondered why, because some people had been traumatized. And it was generally, from what people told me, they were curious. They wanted more information. They were at a point in their lives where they were seeking communication. And I've been teaching people how to communicate, overcoming the fear and moving to communication when they're taken to craft. So although some people are traumatized by this, I think that trauma is very much related to what they think happened, but are not sure happened because they haven't undergone hypnosis and remembered all those memories, or they haven't undergone EMDR therapy with a psychotherapist and remembered the memories. I've worked with people who were highly traumatized. They ended up realizing when they received the information of what happened that it was actually a very positive experience. They were never put on a table. They were educated. They met non-human entities that they recognized and loved. Believe it or not, it's just incredible when you become aware of this sort of thing.
So it was more the fact that they couldn't quite remember and they thought the worst.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. Kathleen, before you go, you mentioned to me a little while ago about I honestly, when I started reporting on this subject, I thought the numbers of people being abducted and the numbers of people making contact, well, it was perhaps in the thousands. And when you mentioned, oh no, it's in the millions, I fell off my chair. What would be a realistic number of people actually having contact experiences today?
I really can't give you a definitive figure. I know that it's happening around the world, across all cultures, religions, educational groups, socioeconomic groups. People are having contact, and they have for a very long time. What I can tell you as the director of Mufon's Experiencer Research Group, we receive about 100 reports every month from people who are English speaking. We don't have a Spanish speaking person yet. We have French, but it's mostly English. We receive about 100 reports a month of individuals who want to speak with a member of our team who will be non-judgmental.
That's important, I guess, with more and more people coming forward, knowing that they can tell their story without being judged. Would you suggest to these people who are on the brink of coming out and sharing their story to perhaps stay out of a lot of the forums online, because they can be a very negative place?
If it's a highly negative place to go to, I mean, you have the option of removing yourself from that group. There are positive forums as well, and places that are very good to go to for information, for sharing. And so I would look for those groups. A lot of times you don't know in advance, but you can just give it a try if you are interested. Also, if you would like to be able to become part of an experiencer workshop kind of group or support kind of group, the people on the Mufon's Experiencer Research team have a list of those groups. So what people need to do is go to mufon.com, scroll down to Experiencer Research Team. The team will come up, and at the top of the page, you'll see complete the Experiencer questionnaire. It's only 30 questions. It's not the survey that I've been talking about. It's different. It's simple. It's just true or false. It doesn't matter what you score. Just complete it. It is kind of an icebreaker. So the person on the research team will know a little bit about you. just complete that. Your questionnaire will go to Dr. George Medich, who runs the team on a day-to-day basis. He's the assistant director, and he will assign a team member to contact you, and you can go to that person, have a conversation, and receive information that you're looking for, support groups, or the names of psychotherapists or hypnosis practitioners who work with experiencers.
I
They're
think that,
vetted.
yeah, I think that's
set
the
up a
that's the better option, I think. Kathleen, before we move on to something else, I've done a lot of interviews now since about last November, and I've spoken with many people with many contact experiences, and also people from the mainline UFO community. And the one thing that I noticed, and I thought it was just me maybe noticing it at first, but there seemed to be a bit of a divide between the consciousness community and the mainline UFO community. And I thought I'd kind of dig a little bit deeper. Would you agree that there is, and if there is there being anything done to bring people closer together?
I agree, there has always been a separation between the scientifically oriented UFO community and the consciousness community. And I have to say that I have always been a scientific ufologist up until, and I still am, but I have expanded my awareness recently, and others such as Grant Cameron have, Paula Harris, who is a longtime researcher as well. And so many of us are beginning to look into this. Now, the reason I believe there has been this separation is because we've always thought of channeling as simply being somebody's imagination, that this was impossible. And when I started to look into this years ago, I could not find consistency. People would send me their information, and I could not find anything consistent about the information they gave. Then in 2012, I was contacted by a man in Australia. His name is Paul Hamden, and he is a medium and an experiencer, has been since he was a child. And it began to make sense, because let me tell you, I wanted to test him to see if what he said was true and real. And so he let me speak to Keek, who is what he calls the entity that he speaks to. And I had a debilitating illness. I'd had it for a number of years. And I asked Keek for healing. I didn't expect to have healing. I expected that I would find out that Paul was having imaginary experiences. I have to say that I had a bias. And 4 nights later, I woke up because of the pain in my body, and these entities were working on me. I was in some kind of environment. It certainly wasn't my bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
There was light, dim light there. There were 2 glowing entities near my head. I was lying on a table. I was being shown and kind of an outline of my body with sort of, I don't know if it was molecules or energy or what, running through the periphery. I could see organs in my body that were colored in pastel colors that they were working on. And when I woke up the next morning, I was healed. I have not had a relapse since that day. And so I thought, you know, there's maybe something to this, not with everybody, but with some people. And so I started to study consciousness. And I had, as I believe I said earlier, ample evidence that contact is real, UFO abductions are real. But I decided to explore this. And so I, through my Aunt Betty, gained an interest in Wilbert Smith, who was a radio engineer for the Canadian government, who ran Project Magnet, and also an interest in Herbert Knowles, who was a vice admiral in the Navy. And they had a close relationship. And they were very interested in a woman named Frances Swan, who lived in Maine, in the same town that Admiral Knowles lived in. And starting in 1954, she began to have telepathic communication with a group of non-human entities who claimed that they were extraterrestrial. And Admiral Knowles and Wilbert Smith were very interested in this, but I couldn't find additional information. Grant Cameron had FBI files showing that this was real, and there was a government interest, CIA, FBI, Office of Naval Intelligence interest in this. And so I put out the word that I would like to find those files, that correspondence files between Admiral Knowles and Wilbert Smith. And Admiral Knowles' granddaughter came to me with a thick packet of information. And I was able to read the communication files and the information that they were able to acquire, that they believed was real because it was backed up by scientific evidence far beyond the knowledge of Frances Swan. And that these entities said that they were here to help us if we wanted their assistance. And that would have to be an agreement among all governments around the world. And the US government was not interested in this. And also, they were very interested in our environment and in our use of nuclear weapons. Those were the two main themes, that they were concerned that there could be an environmental collapse, or it could lead to the disintegration of our species and life on this planet. And so those were the primary messages. And so I became so interested in what information was shared with them, the government interest and the verification of some of the things stated, that I decided to study Kevin Briggs, and was able to communicate with these non-humans over a 2-year period, to ask questions and receive answers. And so I guess I joined the consciousness community at that point, only because I was investigating this scientifically. I was looking for scientific evidence that it was true. And I'm saying that in these 3 cases, I believe it is true. I'm not saying that everyone who is part of the consciousness community and giving information is giving accurate information. I still consider myself to be scientifically oriented in what I do. But I did, in order to be able to communicate with these entities myself telepathically, had to put myself into a position where I was willing to open myself up to this and not take a hardline skeptical point of view. We found that the skeptics, those who didn't believe this was possible, were not able to communicate. But those who were willing to open their minds to this achieved that communication.
Yeah. Well, it was Grant Cameron that really piqued my interest when I interviewed him, and because I thought Grant was a hardcore mainline UFO researcher, but when he told me that he thought the consciousness community held the key to ultimate disclosure, and so I kind of delved into that a little bit, and I agree with him. It makes sense.
Yes, yes, it makes sense to me too. So Grant and I started our interest in this, one not knowing that the other had an interest in it, in 2012. And so I've been keeping that a secret for a number of years because I didn't want to be criticized and to lose my credibility in the UFO scientifically oriented community, because I still have a foot in that community.
Right.
But I've expanded it to the consciousness community as well.
Well, it was 2012. The date that Grant mentioned to me was when he kind of saw the light, so to speak.
Yeah.
Kathleen, thanks again for your time. Always gracious, and always great to speak to you.
Very nice to speak with you again.
Kathleen Marden joining us today.